My name is Glorия Johnson. I'm 55 years old and I've been a financial consultant for more than 20 years. In that time, I've seen how money changes people, how it tears families apart, how it drives some to crime. But I never imagined my own family would fall victim to such greed. Everyone needs to hear this story because what happened to me could happen to anyone. I'm standing on the deck of the luxury yacht Victoria, wearing my best sea green dress. My eldest son, Michael's wedding, was supposed to be the happiest day of my life since Richard's death. Around me, the atmosphere is pure celebration. Guests laugh, glasses clink, music plays. Daniel is dancing with a blonde. Robert is entertaining a circle of friends with jokes. Everything looks perfect, but something is wrong. That feeling has stalked me all day, like a shadow at my back. I can't name it, can't catch hold of it. I only know that somewhere deep inside, my stomach knots with unease. Maybe it was the way Victoria looked at me this morning, or the strange broken-off conversation between Daniel and Carol when I walked in, or perhaps the way Robert has avoided my eyes all day. I shake it off. Nonsense. Just nerves on such an important day. Since Richard's death, I've become far too suspicious. Gloria! Victoria rushes toward me, panic in her eyes. Gloria, quick! Something's wrong with Michael. My heart leaps to my throat. What happened? I don't know. He felt sick, said he was nauseous, and went to the stern. Hurry! She seizes my hand and pulls me across the deck. We weave past laughing guests who don't even notice our urgency. The stern is deserted. Only the crash of waves and the muffled strains of music from above. Where's Michael? I demand, scanning the shadows. Victoria turns to me, and in her eyes I see it. That cold something that has unsettled me all day. Gloria, she says softly, her voice transformed. Calm, cold, calculating. It's time you joined your husband. Her meaning doesn't register before a sudden shove hits my chest. I stumble backward, falling over the rail, her voice ringing out. Your late husband is waiting for you in the afterlife, old woman. The Atlantic hits me like a slap. My dress soaks instantly, dragging me down. Panic surges, but instinct takes over. My hands clutch at something thick and rough. A mooring rope hanging along the yacht's side. The rope slices into my palms, but I hold on as if it were life itself, because it is. Above, voices carry faintly, did she drown? Of course she did. In that dress, at her age, no one will even notice until we're back in port. They think I'm dead. That gives me an advantage. But first, I have to survive. My hands slip on the wet rope. Every inch upward is agony. My fingers are numb with cold. My arms burn with strain. My soaked dress catches on the hull, nearly pulling me off. Richard would never forgive me if I gave up now, not after everything we endured together. I hang there, breath ragged, heart pounding. With trembling hands, I climb higher, inch by inch. And suddenly, I realize, 4 months ago, when Victoria first appeared in our lives, I felt this same unease, and I ignored it. How foolish I was. 4 months ago, it began. 4 months ago, I was sitting in Dr. Wilson's office, listening as he explained the cause of my husband's death. A heart attack, he said. Sudden but not unusual for a man his age. Stress, overwork, poor diet. But I remembered how Richard had complained of nausea for the past 2 weeks, how he said his coffee tasted oddly bitter, how Dr. Wilson avoided my eyes as he signed the death certificate. Mrs. Johnson, he told me gently, sometimes we think we know our loved ones better than they know themselves, but the heart can fail at any moment. I didn't believe him then, and I don't believe him now. The funeral passed in a haze. Michael held himself together, though I saw the tremor in his hands. Daniel drank more than usual. Robert managed every detail, not letting me dwell on anything. A month later, when the sharpest edge of grief had dulled, Victoria Hart appeared. "Mrs. Johnson," she said, settling gracefully into the chair across from my desk, "your son, Michael, referred me. I'm a family therapist specializing in grief counseling." She was beautiful, not flashy but elegant. Chestnut hair pinned into a neat bun, a modest but expensive suit, a soft voice, the kind of woman Michael might find appealing. "Michael is worried about you," she continued. "He says you're struggling to accept your husband's death." That's normal, but sometimes professional guidance makes it easier. Something in her tone made me wary, too confident for a first visit. "How long have you known my son?" I asked. "Oh, we only met recently. Through friends at the hospital. Michael mentioned the family tragedy and I offered to help. Free of charge, of course. It's part of my volunteer work." Free of charge. That should have reassured me. Instead, it unsettled me even more. Over the following weeks, Victoria became a frequent guest in our home. She counseled Michael, helping him work through his guilt. She talked with Daniel about his drinking and his business failures. With me, she spoke of acceptance and the need to move forward. "Gloria," she told me one day, "you can't live in the past. Richard wouldn't want that." "How do you know what Richard would want?" I snapped. She paused, studying my face. "I'm sorry. You're right. I didn't know your husband, but I do know the living must live for the living." Gradually, I noticed our conversations turning more and more toward finances. Victoria asked how I was managing the inheritance, whether it was too much to handle alone. She suggested finding a good financial advisor to take some of the burden off my shoulders. "I know someone very reliable," Victoria said. "He could take some of the burden off your shoulders." That was when it hit me. Victoria knew far too much about our finances for a psychologist we had supposedly met by chance. And I noticed something else. Michael was falling in love with her. It was in the way he looked at her, the way his voice softened whenever he spoke her name. My mother's instinct told me something here was wrong. But the strangest thing happened 2 months after Victoria's arrival. Her younger sister Carol appeared. Carol Hart drifted into our lives like a spring breeze, light, smiling, brimming with energy. She was 24 and studying economics. "I'm writing my thesis on family financial planning," she explained when Victoria introduced us. "She told me you're a very successful consultant. Could I interview you?" I agreed. She seemed sincere, and at first her questions were perfectly professional. But gradually they became more personal. How much had Richard left? How were the assets divided between me and my sons? Did we have accounts overseas? "It's for my research," she said brightly, "to understand the psychology of financial decisions in times of crisis, how families handle large sums after losing someone close." Daniel was charmed by her. Carol knew how to listen, and my younger son had always craved someone's ear. She sympathized with his failures, encouraged his wild ideas everyone else dismissed. "Danny, you just haven't found your niche," she told him. "You've got potential. You just need some starting capital." And then it dawned on me. Carol wasn't studying economics. She was studying us. I decided to test my suspicions. Quietly, I checked the university registry. No Carol Hart listed in the economics department. When I called the dean's office under the pretense of writing a recommendation, they told me no such student existed. Maybe she was at another university? Or on leave? When I asked her directly, she explained she had transferred from another state and the paperwork was still being processed. It sounded reasonable. Bureaucracy could drag on for months. She even had all the trappings of a real student. Stacks of textbooks, endless chatter about exams, even a student ID I glimpsed once in her bag. One evening, while Victoria was holding another session with Michael, she left her handbag in the living room. Curiosity got the better of me. Inside, among her usual things, I found a strange notebook. Its pages weren't filled with therapy notes, but numbers. Rows and rows of numbers. Some looked familiar, figures I had mentioned when talking about the inheritance. Others made no sense, far too small or far too large. On one page, M. Trust established, ready for next step. M. Michael, or another client. Therapists must have many. On another, D needs $200,000 by year's end. Opportunity? Daniel's debts did hover around that sum. And yet, if Victoria worked with clients facing financial trouble, such notes could seem professional. But the most unsettling entry, Obstacle G, resolve delicately after full access secured. Gloria? Me? But what did resolve delicately mean? My resistance to therapy? Or someone else entirely? Gerald, Greg? My heart hammered as I quickly photographed the pages and put the notebook back. Maybe I was being paranoid after Richard's death. Maybe I was misreading her notes. But deep inside, I knew. Something was wrong. The next day, I turned to Robert. He wasn't just the family lawyer. He had been Richard's friend for years. If I could trust anyone, it was him. Robert, I said once we were alone in his office, I need your honesty. What do you think of Victoria? He was silent for a long time, weighing his words. Gloria. Before his death, Richard said some strange things. He was worried. He asked me to be especially cautious of any new people who came into your lives. He suspected something? I don't know. Maybe it was just paranoia. He knew the end was near. In those final months, he grew mistrustful, suspicious of everyone. He even accused the maid of moving his things. The doctor said it was common with heart conditions. Lack of oxygen to the brain can cloud the mind. Robert pulled a small envelope from his desk drawer, but he asked me to watch over you and the boys. And he left this, told me to give it to you only if I felt you were in danger. I opened it. Inside was a note in Richard's shaky hand. Gloria, if you're reading this, my fears were justified. Be careful. Not everyone can be trusted, even those who seem close. When did he write this? A week before he died. Though, Robert hesitated. The handwriting was unsteady. He may not have been himself. We sat in silence. What should we do? Robert asked. For now, nothing. Maybe we're just imagining things. But I'll keep watching. And yet, only a week later, something happened that silenced every doubt. Michael came home beaming and announced that Victoria had agreed to marry him. What's more, she insisted the wedding happen as soon as possible. Mom, we want to get married in a month, Michael declared, glowing with joy. Victoria says there's no reason to wait. Life is short. We have to cherish every moment. Life is short. After Richard's death, the phrase sounded almost ominous. Don't you think it's a little rushed? I asked carefully. You've only known each other for 3 months. When you meet the right person, time doesn't matter, Michael said with the certainty of a man in love, and Victoria's right. After what happened to Dad, we've learned tomorrow isn't guaranteed. Victoria nodded, taking his hand. I don't want long, drawn-out preparations. Just a simple ceremony, only close family, and... Her eyes flicked to me. I thought a wedding on a yacht would be the perfect symbol. A new beginning, new horizons. I blinked in surprise. On a yacht? Here in Miami, but we don't... My uncle does, Victoria cut in quickly. He'd be happy to lend it for such a special occasion. Just picture it. The ceremony at sunset, Biscayne Bay, a gentle ocean breeze. An uncle she had never mentioned before. Of course, in Florida, many families owned yachts. It wasn't unusual. And yet, something about the suggestion felt off. I couldn't explain why. Isn't it romantic? Victoria added, gazing at Michael with adoring eyes. In the days that followed, she became the perfect bride-to-be. She asked my advice on flowers, discussed the menu, even wanted my opinion on her dress. We went shopping together in downtown Miami, strolled along Lincoln Road like any ordinary mother and future daughter-in-law. But whenever the conversation turned to finances after the wedding, her eyes sharpened. "Gloria," she said one afternoon as we sipped tea on the terrace of our Coral Gables home, "Michael told me about Richard's will. It must be so difficult managing all those assets on your own." "I'm managing," I answered shortly. "Of course you are." But after the wedding, when Michael and I are living together, perhaps it's time to consider a family trust. It would make everything so much easier. A family trust. Where, I wondered, had she learned the finer points of estate law? "That's a very serious decision," I said evenly. "It takes time to consider." "Of course." She smiled warmly. "I just want everything properly arranged. For the good of the family. The good of the family." She said the right words, but her tone only deepened my unease. Meanwhile, Carol kept helping Daniel with his financial troubles. She'd even found him a potential investor for a new project, but naturally, guarantees were required. "Mom," Daniel said one evening, "I need your signature on a guarantee." "It's nothing binding, just a formality to show we're serious." "How much?" "Only $200,000. If the project doesn't work out, I'll pay it back within a year." $200,000. Exactly the number I'd seen in Victoria's notebook, next to the letter D. "Danny," I said gently, "what if I'm not ready to take that kind of risk right now?" His face darkened. "Mom, this is my chance to finally get on my feet." "Carol says her investor friend is a very reliable man. If I let this slip..." "And how does Carol know this investor?" "Well, through her university connections. She knows lots of people in finance." University connections. From a girl who might not have been enrolled in any university at all. I asked for time to think, and Daniel left, clearly disappointed. An hour later, Carol called. "Mrs. Johnson," she said softly, her tone tinged with sadness, "I'm so sorry to disturb you this late. Danny told me about your hesitation. I understand your doubts, but my acquaintance can only hold these terms until the end of the week. After that, the funds will be committed elsewhere." "The end of the week? Just before the wedding?" "Carol," I asked, "could I meet this investor myself?" A pause. "Unfortunately, he's in New York on negotiations right now. But I have all the documents proving his reputation. Of course, in New York, safely out of reach." After that conversation, my unease only grew. All threads pointed to one date, the wedding. But I still couldn't see the shape of the plan. The next morning, I drove to Robert's office, determined to tell him everything. His firm was in a downtown tower overlooking the bay, but when I stepped into his office, I found him pale and visibly shaken. "Gloria," he said gravely, "there's something important you need to know. Yesterday, a private investigator came to see me. He's working a case involving inheritance fraud, and among the suspects is a woman who matches Victoria's description." "A private investigator?" I repeated, my pulse quickening. "She was hired by a family in Orlando," Robert explained, pulling a folder from his safe. "Their father died under similar circumstances. A young wife, a family therapist, a quick marriage, and then a tragic accident with the heir." I took the folder with trembling hands. Inside were photographs, blurry, taken from a distance, but the woman in them looked very much like Victoria. Dark hair, delicate features, the same confident stride. "Is it her?" Robert asked. "She looks like her, but..." I studied the photo more closely. The hair is shorter. She looks older. Maybe it's just a resemblance. Possibly. The detective said there's no hard evidence, only suspicions and coincidences. Coincidences. How many had crept into my life since Victoria appeared? What happened to that family in Orlando? The father died of a heart attack. The son drowned on his honeymoon in the Bahamas. Officially, an accident. Drowned. How curious, then, that Victoria had chosen a yacht for the wedding. I went home in turmoil. Only a week remained before the ceremony, and I still didn't know what to do. Accuse Victoria on the basis of shadows and suspicion? She could be innocent. And I, a paranoid widow, destroying my son's happiness. That evening, Victoria came to dinner. She was particularly sweet, helping in the kitchen, sharing amusing stories from her practice. If it was a mask, it was flawless. "Gloria," she said as we washed dishes together, "I want you to know how much your blessing means to me. Michael loves you so much, and I hope in time we can grow close too." "Of course, dear," I replied, studying her face. "Michael is my whole world. His happiness is mine." "I know. And that's why I want to discuss something delicate with you. Here it comes. I'm listening. Michael told me about your financial difficulties since your husband's death. Taxes, asset management, investment choices. That's a heavy burden for one person. Financial difficulties? We had none." "I'm not sure what you're talking about." "Well, Michael mentioned that you sometimes lie awake at night, worrying about the family budget. That the expenses from his medical practice had become overwhelming. And then, of course, Daniel's debts." She spoke with such confidence, as if she knew our affairs better than I did. But it was all lies. Yes, Daniel had debts, but nothing crippling. Yes, managing the assets required care, but I was doing just fine. "Victoria, who told you that?" "Michael, of course. He worries about you. And I thought, after the wedding, maybe it's time to consider creating a family trust. It would take a huge weight off your shoulders." "And who would manage this trust?" "Well, naturally, Michael. He's the most responsible in the family, and as a doctor, he knows how to make sound decisions." Michael, who was head over heels in love with her and would do anything she asked. "That's an interesting idea," I said carefully, "but I need time to think about it." "Of course." Victoria smiled sweetly, "although our lawyer will be at the wedding. If you decide, we could sign the papers right there. Very convenient, don't you think? A lawyer. At the wedding. On a yacht. Where no one could verify his credentials or the authenticity of the documents. How very thoughtful of you. I just want to take care of the family that will soon be mine." That night, I barely slept. I lay awake replaying every conversation with Victoria in my mind. Every question, every suggestion. It all seemed like pieces of a carefully crafted plan. The next morning, I decided to confront Michael directly. "Son," I asked as he came down to breakfast, "did you really tell Victoria we're having financial problems?" Michael looked embarrassed. "It's not a problem, Mom. I see how tired you get dealing with all that paperwork, and since Dad's death, you've been more anxious. Victoria thinks it would be easier for you if someone shared the responsibility. And you agree with her. I want you to be happy and at peace. If creating a trust would help. Michael, have you checked Victoria's credentials? Her degree, her license to practice?" He frowned. "Mom, what kind of question is that?" "Of course I trust my fiancé." Trusts her. Not checked. Just trusts. That same day, I heard rumors that Carol had been asking questions around the neighborhood. Mrs. Rodriguez, our neighbor, told me the sweet girl, Daniel's friend, wanted to know when we usually left the house, whether we had a security system, and if she'd seen any suspicious cars nearby. Suspicious cars, as if someone were planning a break-in, or worse. 3 days remained before the wedding, and I understood. Whatever the Hart sisters were planning, time was almost up. Soon I'd be trapped on that yacht, alone against whoever might be in on it. The wedding on the yacht, Victoria unfolded like a fairy tale. The sun dipped low over Biscayne Bay, painting the sky in rose and gold. A soft ocean breeze lifted white ribbons and flowers. Guests laughed, champagne flowed, music played. I stood beside Michael, watching joy radiate from his face. My eldest son had finally found love after years of burying himself in work. Victoria, in her white gown, looked angelic. If not for my suspicions, I would have rejoiced with all my heart. The ceremony was perfect. The vows were moving. Michael even shed a tear. Victoria spoke beautifully about how happy she was to become part of our family. If it was all an act, she played it masterfully. Daniel mingled among the guests, dancing with girls, laughing with friends, the carefree younger brother at his elder's wedding. Nothing unusual. I leaned against the rail watching the sunset, imagining how Richard would have cherished this moment. Around me, guests celebrated, but inside me, a sense of dread coiled tighter and tighter. I couldn't shake the feeling something was about to happen, something terrible. Victoria appeared suddenly, her face filled with worry. "Gloria," she whispered urgently, glancing around. "Gloria, quickly." "What is it, dear?" "Something's wrong with Michael." Her voice trembled with panic. "He had some champagne and now he feels sick. Very sick. He says everything is spinning." My heart shot to my throat. "Oh God, where is he?" "He went to the stern, away from the guests. He doesn't want anyone to see him like this on his wedding day. But I'm scared, Gloria. What if there was something in the champagne?" She gripped my hand and pulled me toward the back of the yacht, slipping skillfully between clusters of guests. She timed it perfectly, everyone busy talking and dancing, no one paying us the slightest attention. "Please, faster," she whispered. "I'm afraid he's getting worse." We passed laughing guests, waiters with trays, couples swaying to the music. No one noticed the two women hurrying toward the stern. The stern was deserted, eerily quiet. Only the crash of waves and the muffled sounds of celebration drifted from the deck. I looked around, searching for Michael. "Where is he?" I asked, panic rising. Victoria stopped and turned to me slowly. The fear melted from her face as if it had never been there. Gone was the anxious bride. In her place, cold, calculating eyes. "Gloria," she said softly, her voice entirely different. "Michael's fine." "What? But you said—" "I said what I needed to get you here." I tried to back away, but Victoria closed the space between us in an instant. "You know too much. About Richard. About our plans. You're a clever woman, Gloria, but sometimes cleverness is dangerous." "It's time you joined your husband," she hissed. She shoved me hard in the chest. I staggered back against the rail, and the last thing I heard before plunging into the sea was her scream. "Your dead husband is waiting for you, old woman." The Atlantic hit me like a slap. My drenched gown dragged me under, but my hands found a mooring rope dangling along the yacht's side. I clung to it with everything I had. Every inch upward was a battle. My fingers slid, numb with cold. My soaked dress snagged on the hull, nearly pulling me down again. But I refused to let go. Richard would never forgive me if I gave up. Inch by inch, in agonizing effort, I pulled myself back to the deck. With one final surge, I threw a leg over the rail and collapsed onto the planks. My lungs burned, my heart thundered, water streamed from me in rivulets. I lay there gasping, trying to gather myself. And then I heard voices, people calling my name, shouting, frantic. A plan took shape in my mind, dangerous, risky, but the only chance I had. If I rose now and told the truth, who would believe me? My word against hers. Victoria would say I'd lost my mind from grief, that I hallucinated, that I'd slipped and fallen and now was looking for someone to blame. But if I pretended to remember nothing, if I played the part of a confused, fragile victim, I'd buy myself time. Time to gather proof, time to prepare my move. I closed my eyes and let exhaustion and cold overtake me. Consciousness slipped away and I sank into darkness, knowing that when I woke, the most important game of my life would begin. The game of survival. I woke in a hospital room. White walls, the smell of antiseptic, the steady beep of a monitor, my head heavy, mouth dry, but my mind sharp. Michael sat at my bedside holding my hand. His face was drawn with worry. "Mom!" he cried, springing up as my eyes fluttered open. "Thank God you're awake." "Michael?" My voice was weak, uncertain. "What happened? Where am I?" "You're in the hospital, Mom. You've got hypothermia and a mild concussion, but the doctors say you'll be fine." I furrowed my brow, feigning confusion. I remember the wedding, the music, and then nothing. How did I get here? Michael perched on the edge of the bed, squeezing my hand. "Mom, you fell off the yacht." "We searched everywhere, then found you unconscious on the deck, soaking wet. You must have been in the water, but somehow you managed to pull yourself out." "Fell?" I widened my eyes. "But how? I'm always so careful." "We don't know." "Maybe you slipped. The deck was wet from the spray. The doctor says the cold and the shock might explain why you don't remember. The perfect excuse. A medical justification for my convenient memory loss." "And Victoria?" I asked softly. "She must be devastated the wedding ended this way." "She's here, in the hall." She blames herself for insisting on the yacht. Of course she does. What an actress. "Bring her in, please. I want to tell her it's not her fault." Michael left, and moments later, Victoria swept into the room. Her face wore the same mask of concern, but her eyes searched mine, probing for what I might remember. "Gloria," she cried, rushing to the bed. "How are you feeling?" I was so worried. "Vicky, dear," I whispered, reaching for her hand. "I'm sorry for ruining your special day." Her hand tightened around mine, just slightly. "What are you saying?" "The only thing that matters is that you're alive. We can always have another wedding." "I just don't understand how it happened," I said with a helpless shrug. "I remember watching the sunset and then nothing. The doctor said that's normal after a shock like this." Her shoulders eased. Relief flickered in her eyes. "Don't torment yourself with memories," she said gently. "What matters is you're safe now." "You're right." I smiled at her as warmly as I could manage. "You know, Vicky, maybe this was fate. This accident showed me how much you mean to Michael and to me." Victoria blinked, caught off guard. "Gloria, I want you to know I'm glad you're part of this family. After Richard's death, I thought I'd never trust anyone again. But you're special." The hardest words I'd ever spoken. Each one dragged out of me, but I saw their effect on her. Her posture loosened, her breathing steadied. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means so much." Michael walked back in. "Mom, how are you feeling?" "Much better, son." Especially after talking with Victoria, I glanced at them both. "You know, maybe we should spend more time together. As a real family." Michael beamed. "That's a wonderful idea, Mom." Victoria nodded, but I caught the shadow of doubt in her eyes. She was too clever to believe in such a sudden change of heart. I would need to tread carefully. "Vicky," I said lightly, "and where's Carol? I'd like to thank her too." She went back to campus. Exams, of course. Keep the accomplice far from the scene of the crime." "That's a shame. Please give her my thanks when you speak to her." "Of course I will." A young doctor in a white coat entered the room. "Mrs. Johnson, how are you feeling?" "Much better, doctor." "When can I go home?" "Tomorrow morning, if the tests look good. But you need rest and no stress for the next few weeks." "We'll take care of everything," Victoria said quickly. "Gloria, You can count on us." "Oh, I can count on you, just not the way you think," I answered silently, keeping my grateful smile in place. When they all left, I lay in the dark, planning my next steps. Victoria had fallen for my act, but not for long. I had to move quickly and carefully. Tomorrow I'd return home, and I'd begin the most dangerous investigation of my life, because now I knew the truth. Someone wanted me dead, and the only way to survive was to outsmart the killers. The next day, Michael and Victoria greeted me at the door of our Coral Gables home. Victoria held a bouquet, her face soft with concern. "Welcome home, Gloria," she said warmly. "We were so worried about you." "Thank you, dear," I murmured, swaying a little. Ever since the accident, I've felt scatterbrained. "The doctor said it's normal after a concussion." Michael steadied me by the arm. "Don't worry, Mom. We'll take care of everything." "Yes," Victoria agreed quickly. "You just need to rest and recover." We stepped inside. Everything looked the same, yet I saw it differently now. These walls would hold the most dangerous game of my life. "Vicky, you're so caring," I said as I sank into the living room chair. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Victoria and Michael exchanged a glance. I saw her shoulders ease. "Gloria, you know you can count on me," she replied. "We're family now." "Actually," Michael added, "Victoria suggested staying here for a while." "To help you recover." Perfect. The enemy under my roof. But that was even better. It would be easier to watch her. "What a wonderful idea," I exclaimed. "I'll feel so much safer with you here, Vicky." She smiled, but in her eyes I saw a flicker of triumph. "Then I'll fetch my things," she said. "You rest in the meantime." Once she left, I turned to Michael. "Son," I said, taking his hand, "I'm so grateful you found such a wonderful wife." "Mom," he said softly, sitting beside me, "it means the world to hear you say that." "I know you had doubts at first." "Nonsense," I waved a hand, "just motherly jealousy." And after what happened on the yacht, I realized life is short. We have to treasure the people we have. Michael hugged me tight. "I'm so glad you feel that way." "If only you knew what I was really thinking," I told him silently. That night, when the house went quiet, I began to act. Pretending to feel unwell, I stayed in the living room to rest. In reality, I opened a hidden box and pulled out a set of tiny wireless cameras I had ordered months ago when suspicion first crept in. Carefully, I placed them in the living room, the kitchen, the hallway. Almost invisible, each one streamed to a cloud server I could access from my phone. It was my secret survival plan. If Victoria and her allies truly plotted against me, I would catch them on tape. The next morning at breakfast, I played the part of the forgetful convalescent. "Vicky, dear," I said, stirring my coffee, "where did I leave my purse yesterday?" It slipped my mind. "On the dresser in your room," she answered quickly. "Gloria, are you sure you're feeling all right?" Yes, of course. I just forget little things sometimes. The doctor said it's temporary." She nodded, but her eyes studied me closely. "Oh, by the way," I said casually, "David called yesterday. Something about documents I need to sign. I can't remember what they were for." "Documents?" Victoria asked sharply. "Yes, something to do with Richard's estate. He said it was urgent, but I never understood legal matters." Victoria and Michael exchanged a look. "Mom," Michael said gently. "Maybe Victoria could help. She has some experience with things like that." "Really?" I widened my eyes. "Vicky, you know about legal documents?" "A little," she said modestly. "In family therapy, I often encounter inheritance issues." "And murder for inheritance, too," I thought. "That's wonderful," I exclaimed. "Then maybe you could help me when David brings the papers." "Of course," she said, her voice carrying the faintest note of satisfaction. The bait was set. Now I just had to wait for the catch. After breakfast, Michael left for the hospital and Victoria and I were alone. "Gloria," she said, settling beside me on the couch, "I want you to know, if you need help with anything, just ask. Finances, documents, household matters." "You're so kind," I said with a smile. "You know, Vicky, since Richard's death, all that paperwork feels overwhelming. Sometimes I wish I could just hand it all to someone trustworthy." Victoria leaned closer. "That's only natural. Many people your age prefer to let the younger generation take care of financial matters." My age. 55, not 85, dear, I thought. "Maybe you're right," I said pensively. "Lately, I do find it harder to focus on numbers and papers." Her eyes lit up. The plan was working. That evening, Daniel arrived. He looked nervous, but I greeted him with unusual warmth. "Danny, my boy." I wrapped him in an embrace. "How are you? We've hardly seen each other lately." "Mom," he seemed startled by my affection. "How are you feeling after everything?" "Much better. Sometimes I still feel a little scatterbrained, but Vicky takes such good care of me." Daniel shot a quick glance at Victoria. That's good, Mom." "Danny," I said, taking his hand, "let's see each other more often. Family is the most important thing we have." He nodded, but I noticed his hands trembled. Nervous. Very good. Later that night, once everyone had gone to bed, I checked the camera feeds on my phone. What I saw nearly stopped my heart. Victoria and Daniel stood in the kitchen, speaking in hushed tones. "She's definitely slipping after that fall," Victoria whispered. "It makes everything easier." Daniel, my younger son, the boy I carried, raised, loved, standing there with her. "Are you sure?" he asked. "What if she's faking?" My hands shook as I held the phone. Number, not my boy, not Danny. "No," Victoria said, shaking her head. "I'm a psychologist. I know the signs of cognitive decline. She's showing mild dementia from the injury." Tears welled in my eyes. My own son discussing my so-called dementia as if it were an opportunity. "When do we put the plan in motion?" Daniel asked. The plan? Together? My child, my Danny, was betraying me. "Soon," Victoria said. "First we get control of her finances. Then..." She left the rest unsaid, but I didn't need to hear it. Daniel understood too. My son was planning my death. I shut off the recording with trembling fingers. My heart split in two. The only thing worse than Victoria's betrayal was my own child's. How hadn't I seen it? When had my Daniel turned into a stranger willing to kill his own mother? But tears would have to wait. For now, I had to survive and protect Michael, who suspected nothing. Tomorrow, I would continue my game. But it had become infinitely more painful. A week passed since my release from the hospital. I kept up my role as the slightly confused widow, and each day Victoria grew more confident. At breakfast, I deliberately muddled names. "Vicky, dear, could you pass the sugar to Richard?" I said, nodding toward Michael. "Mom," Michael corrected gently. "It's me. I'm Michael. Dad. Dad's gone." "Oh." I covered my mouth, feigning embarrassment. "Of course, Michael. Forgive me, son. I get so forgetful sometimes." Victoria studied me closely. I saw the confidence hardening in her eyes. "Gloria," she said with concern, "maybe you should see a doctor. These memory lapses can be serious." "You think so?" I widened my eyes and reached for her hand. "But the doctor said it's temporary." "Doctors aren't always right," she countered softly. "Head injuries can have long-term consequences." long-term consequences. She was already planning my future as an incompetent old woman. I smiled sweetly, still squeezing her hand. After Michael left for work, Victoria offered to help with household matters. "Gloria, maybe we should review your financial documents," she suggested, "just so I can better understand your situation and give you the right advice." I gave her a grateful look, as though she were my savior. "Of course, dear." All the papers are in Richard's study. We walked there together, my arm looped through hers, as though I needed her support. I watched her pore over the documents, her eyes practically gleaming with greed at the account balances. "You have quite a substantial estate," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I understand. It's a heavy responsibility for one person." She flipped through the pages, discreetly snapping photos when she thought I wasn't looking. I leaned against her shoulder, feigning fatigue. "Vicky," I said suddenly, looking at her with wide, trusting eyes, "what do you think about handing over management to Michael? He's the eldest and so responsible." Victoria stiffened. "That's one option, but there are others, like professional management through a trust. And who would run that trust?" I tilted my head like a curious child. "Usually someone trustworthy, a family member, or a close friend. Like you," I thought, but outwardly I gazed at her with admiration. That afternoon, David arrived with the documents as planned. I met him in the living room where Victoria was already waiting. Instinctively, I edged closer to her, as if seeking protection. "David," I said, my voice a little unsteady, "did you bring the papers you mentioned?" "Yes, Gloria," he replied, though I caught the wary look in his eyes. "These are the documents to establish a family trust." I nodded, nervously fidgeting with the hem of my dress. Vicky explained to me that this would make managing the money so much easier. David shot a quick glance at Victoria. "Gloria, maybe we should discuss this in private." "Oh, no," I shook my head, reaching for Victoria's hand as though for support. "Vicky is family now, and she understands finance so well. Don't you, dear?" Victoria clasped my hand gently. "I just want to help Gloria make the right decision." David spread the documents across the table. I listened to his explanations, but my eyes kept drifting to Victoria's face, as if searching for her approval. "This is all so complicated," I murmured, rubbing my temple and looking helplessly at her. "My head spins with all these legal terms." "Gloria," David said cautiously, "perhaps it would be best to wait. A decision like this shouldn't be rushed." "No," Victoria cut in smoothly. "Gloria's right to simplify her life. Why delay?" I nodded gratefully, leaning fully on her judgment. "All right," David said. "But Gloria, you do understand that by signing these papers, you're placing control of all your assets in the hands of the trust." Yes, of course," I said quickly, though my eyes were fixed on Victoria, waiting for her reassuring nod. My hand trembled as I picked up the pen. Victoria watched, her expression one of barely concealed triumph. David frowned. Then I began to sign. But instead of my usual signature, I scrawled Gloria Johnson in an entirely different hand, deliberate, quick, as if I were only eager to finish the tiresome procedure. "There," I said with relief, setting the pen down and leaning back in my chair. David gathered the papers, clearly uneasy. "Gloria, if you change your mind—" "I won't," I interrupted, gazing trustingly at Victoria. "Vicky will help me with everything. Right, dear?" "Of course," she replied, and in her voice I heard the thrill of victory barely contained. After David left, I took Victoria's hands in mine, staring into her eyes with gratitude. "Thank you for everything. I don't know what I'd do without you." Her face lit up, radiant with joy. "Gloria, you've made a very wise decision. Now you don't have to worry about finances ever again." "Yes," I sighed, feigning relief. I feel so free. But the real test came that evening. When Michael came home from work, Victoria told him about the signed documents. "Mom," he said, concerned, "are you sure this was the right decision?" I rose and went to Victoria, resting a hand on her shoulder in a show of complete trust. "Of course, son." Vicky explained everything so clearly. Now I don't have to torture myself with all that paperwork. Michael glanced between us. "Maybe I should have been there when you signed." "Why?" I shook my head, gently stroking Victoria's arm. Vicky was with me. She made sure I understood it all. Victoria nodded smoothly. "Michael, your mother made a sound choice. Her finances are now under proper protection. Late that night, when the house was quiet, I checked my hidden cameras. What I saw exceeded my darkest fears." Victoria stood in the kitchen, speaking on the phone. "It's done," she said. "The old fool signed everything. We've got control of her money now." "And what about Michael?" a man's voice asked. "Daniel. He suspects nothing. He thinks I'm helping his mother. Such a naive boy. Naive boy." That's how she spoke of my son. My hands clenched into fists. "And what's next?" Daniel asked. "Next, we wait a couple of months. Then, an accident. An elderly woman with dementia, living alone. It happens all the time." "Victoria, what if Michael starts to suspect?" "Then we'll have to deal with him too. But for now, he's too in love to see straight. Deal with Michael." The realization hit like ice. If necessary, they plan to kill him too. "Are you sure the documents are valid?" Daniel pressed. "Of course. She signed them herself. David will attest she was of sound mind. If only they knew my own hand had written a signature so false it would never survive examination." I smiled grimly to myself. But now I had their voices on record, my first real piece of evidence. I needed more, much more. I listened on. "By the way," Victoria added, "Carol will be back soon." Time to move to the next stage. "She's ready?" Daniel asked. "More than ready. We've already discussed the details. Everything will look natural. Carol is coming back. That meant my time was running out. Soon they'd make their move. I switched off the recording and lay back in bed. Tomorrow I'd continue the performance. But now the stakes were higher. Not only my life was on the line, they would kill Michael too if he stood in their way. I wouldn't let that happen, no matter the cost. Several more days passed, and I noticed Victoria changing. Now that she believed she controlled my finances, her mask of the attentive bride began to slip. At breakfast, she barely listened to my confused remarks. "Vicky, dear," I said sweetly, "do you know where I left my glasses yesterday?" "I don't know, Gloria," she replied without looking up from her phone. "Check for yourself." Once she would have rushed to help me. Now she couldn't care less. Michael frowned at his wife. "Vicky, maybe you could help Mom." Of course, of course." Victoria recovered quickly, but I caught the flicker of irritation in her eyes. "Gloria, let's look for them together." She stood, her movements slow, reluctant. When Michael turned to the coffee maker, I saw her roll her eyes. "There you are, darling," I thought, "your true face at last." After Michael left for work, Victoria grew even more careless. She sat next to me on the couch, but kept her distance now, none of that fake tenderness she used to play. "Gloria," she said in a patronizing tone, "I have errands to run. You'll be fine here on your own, won't you?" "Of course, dear," I answered meekly. "What kind of errands?" "Bank matters, connected to your trust." She didn't even bother to hide it. She was going to play with my money. "Maybe I should come with you?" I asked timidly. Victoria gave me the look one gives a tiresome child. "Why? You've already said you don't understand finance. I'll take care of it." And with that, she left, barely offering a goodbye. The moment the door shut, I checked my camera feeds. What I saw from the previous night made my stomach clench. Victoria and Daniel sitting in the kitchen, no longer bothering to disguise their contempt. "My God, she's pathetic," Victoria said, sipping her wine. "Yesterday she asked me 3 times what the mailman's name was. 3 times. Good thing her brain's finally turning to mush," Daniel laughed. "Makes everything easier." Hearing my own son laugh about me that way, my son whom I carried, raised, loved, was almost more than I could bear. "Michael suspects nothing?" Daniel asked. "Not a thing." Yesterday I told him his mother might be a danger to herself, and he immediately agreed that we need to take precautions. "What kind of precautions?" "Well, if an old woman with dementia accidentally takes too many sleeping pills, who's going to ask questions?" Sleeping pills. That was their plan, to poison me. "And Michael's inheritance?" Daniel pressed. "Of course, he'll get his share. But as trustee, I'll control the bulk of the money. And if something happens to him later, well, accidents do happen." She spoke of killing my son with the same ease as discussing a grocery list. "When?" Daniel asked impatiently. "Soon. Carol will bring the medication the day after tomorrow. It'll look natural, a depressed old woman overdosing on her pills. The day after tomorrow. 2 days. That's all I had left." The recording went on, each word cutting deeper. "You know," Daniel said, "sometimes I almost feel sorry for her. She was a decent mother once." "Was," Victoria agreed. "But now she's nothing but an obstacle. Honestly, maybe we're doing her a favor." A favor. Think about it. Living with dementia, slowly losing your mind. Better to go while there's still some dignity left. Not only were they planning to kill me, they were convincing themselves it was an act of mercy. The sound of keys in the lock jolted me. I switched off the recording just as Victoria walked in, her mask of concern firmly back in place. "How are you, Gloria?" she asked, her voice as fake as her smile. "Much better, dear," I replied, feigning delight at her return. "I missed you." "Oh, how sweet," she said, patting my shoulder as if I were a dog. "By the way, Carol's coming tomorrow. She's dying to see you." Carol. Bringing the poison, I thought grimly. How thoughtful of her. I smiled. Such a caring girl. "Yes, very caring," Victoria echoed, her tone laced with hidden meaning. At dinner that night, she barely bothered to conceal her disdain. When I dropped my fork, she rolled her eyes. When I asked her to repeat something, she sighed with irritation. Michael noticed. "Vicky, are you okay? You look tired." "Yes, a little," she admitted. "Caring for Gloria takes a lot of energy. Sometimes I think her condition is getting worse." "Worse?" Michael looked at me, concerned. "Well, today she asked me when Richard would be back." Several times. A lie. I had never said that. "Mom," Michael squeezed my hand. "You remember Dad passed away, don't you?" I gave him a confused look. "Of course I remember, son. I just forget sometimes. I'm sorry." Michael shot Victoria a worried glance. "Maybe she should see another doctor." "I was thinking the same," Victoria nodded. "But you know, at her age, the outlook isn't always encouraging." "At my age." 55, not 90, darling. I fumed silently. After dinner, while Michael worked in his study, Victoria approached me in the living room. "Gloria," she said, using that sing-song tone reserved for children, "tomorrow Carol's bringing you something to help you sleep. You've been having trouble with insomnia, haven't you?" "Yes," I answered softly. "Sometimes I can't sleep at all." Good. Carol met an incredible woman. She practices natural medicine, cures even the toughest cases. Completely harmless, all natural remedies. "You're so thoughtful, Vicky," I said, taking her hand. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Victoria glanced at my hand with thinly veiled disgust, but let me hold it. "Oh, Gloria, don't be silly." We're family. Family. Where the children plot to kill their own mother, I thought, the irony burning. That night, I lay in bed, planning for tomorrow. Carol would arrive with the poison. They would try to make me drink it, and I had to be ready. I had recordings of their conversations, but that might not be enough. I needed to catch them in the act, to make them admit what they'd already done and what they were planning next. Tomorrow, it would all come to an end. Either I'd expose them or... I refused to think of the alternative. I closed my eyes, but sleep never came. Tomorrow would be the most important day of my life, the day I'd find out if I could outwit my killers and survive. By morning, the weight in my chest was almost unbearable. Today, everything would be decided. At breakfast, I played up my absent-mindedness. "Michael, darling," I asked, "when is your father coming home from work?" Michael froze with his coffee cup halfway to his lips. "Mom, Dad died 8 months ago." "Oh, right, of course." I shook my head as if trying to clear it. "Sometimes I just forget." Victoria shot Michael a meaningful look. I saw the worry cloud his face. "Mom, maybe you really should see a doctor." "Don't worry," I said, patting his hand. "Carol's coming today. She's bringing medicine to help me sleep better." Victoria nodded. Yes, a natural remedy. Very effective. Very effective. Permanently, I thought darkly. Once Michael left for work, the atmosphere shifted. Victoria no longer bothered with her mask of tenderness. She moved around the house like she owned it, tapping on her phone, preparing for something important. At noon, Carol arrived. She looked tense, but determined. In her hands, a small box. "Gloria!" she exclaimed with forced cheer. "How are you feeling?" "Carol, darling." I stood and embraced her warmly. "I'm so glad to see you." Her body was stiff in my arms. "I brought the medicine Victoria mentioned," she said, showing me the box. "My healer friend prepared it just for you." "You're so caring," I smiled. "What kind of medicine is it?" "Natural sleep aid," Carol replied. "Herbs. It'll help with insomnia, calm your nerves, and stop my heart," I added silently. We sat in the living room. Carol pulled a small vial of dark liquid from the box. "You need to drink it all at once," she explained. "Best before bed. It works quickly." "Could I try it now?" I asked innocently. "I feel so restless today." Carol and Victoria exchanged a quick look. "It's still daytime," Victoria objected. "Better to wait until evening." "But I'm so tired," I pressed. "And you said it's natural, didn't you?" "That means it's harmless." Carol hesitated. "Well, maybe just a little—" "No!" Victoria cut her off sharply. "Gloria, wait until tonight. We don't want you sleeping the whole day away." They weren't ready for a daylight murder. They wanted the cover of night, when it would all seem so... natural. "All right, dear," I agreed meekly. "As you wish." The longer we sat together, the more careless they became. Their guard slipped. "Gloria," Victoria said in a patronizing tone, "do you even remember what you signed last week?" "Some papers," I answered vaguely. "I don't recall exactly." "Trust documents," Carol supplied with a smirk. "Victoria controls your money now." "Oh, yes," I nodded. "That's good. I've always had trouble with finances." "Of course you have," Carol giggled. "In your condition." Victoria shot her a warning glance, but Carol couldn't stop herself. "Honestly, Gloria, you're lucky Victoria's so patient. Anyone else would have—" "Carol," Victoria snapped. "What? She doesn't understand anyway." Carol shrugged. They were losing their discipline. Perfect. "So what happened to my husband?" I asked suddenly. "Why did he die so suddenly?" Victoria and Carol exchanged another look. "Heart attack," Victoria said smoothly. "We told you before." "Yes, but he was so healthy," I pressed. He took his heart medication every day. Exactly, Carol interrupted without thinking. Medication doesn't always work. Victoria shot her a worried look. Especially if you add something extra to them, Carol went on carelessly. Carol, Victoria hissed. But it was too late. Carol realized she'd said too much. I mean, interactions with other medications. She tried to correct herself. Of course, dear, I nodded. I understand. But I understood far more than they thought. By evening, Daniel returned. The whole pack was now assembled. Michael was still at the hospital, emergency surgery. The three of us sat in the living room. The air was thick with tension. Everyone knew tonight would be different. Gloria, Victoria said, it's time to take your medicine. Already? I glanced at the clock. But it's only 8 o'clock. The sooner you take it, the better you'll sleep, Daniel pressed. Carol produced the vial. Here, drink it all. I took it in my hands. The liquid was dark, almost black. It smelled bitter and strange. What herbs are in this? I asked. Valerian, motherwort, Carol began, but Victoria cut her off. You don't need to know the ingredients. Just drink. Her tone was no longer coaxing. It was a command. All right, I said meekly. I raised the vial to my lips, pretending to drink. In truth, I only wet my lips. When they turned their heads at a noise outside, I quickly poured the contents into the potted plant beside my chair. All done, I said, showing them the empty vial. I drank it. Now it was a matter of waiting. Victoria, Carol, and Daniel watched me intently. After a few minutes, I began to feign drowsiness. I feel strange, I murmured, rubbing my eyes. My head is spinning. That's normal, Carol assured me. The medicine is starting to work. I slumped back in the chair, closed my eyes, slowed my breathing. Gloria, Victoria called. I didn't answer. Gloria, she repeated louder. I remained motionless, and then, exactly as I expected, the masks came off. Finally, Daniel exhaled in relief. I thought it would never end. How long will she stay like this? Victoria asked. Couple of hours, Carol replied. Then her heart stops. It'll look completely natural. They thought I was dying and began openly discussing my murder. What do we tell Michael? Daniel asked. That we found her in the morning, Victoria answered smoothly. She took a sleeping pill and never woke up. At her age, with her problems, no one will question it. And the documents? They're solid? Carol pressed. Of course, Victoria said. I'm trustee of the estate now. And through Michael, I control the rest. And if Michael starts to suspect, then he'll have an accident too, Victoria said coldly. Young doctors sometimes overdo stimulants. Heart failure. They were planning to kill Michael. My eldest son had no idea what danger he was in. And what about Dad? Daniel asked. Did he suffer long? Not really, Carol said. The poison in his heart meds worked gradually. A few days of discomfort, then nothing. Good, Daniel said flatly. He deserved it. Spent his whole life worshiping Michael. Michael the doctor. Michael the pride of the family. And you, Daniel, lost money again. I was sick of being the loser. And Mom? Victoria asked. Mom always defended him, Daniel sneered. Don't upset your father, Daniel. Be more like Michael, Daniel. They both saw me as dead weight. Now I'll show them who's worthless. My heart shattered. My own son had hated us all these years. Shame we had to wait this long, Daniel added. I thought we'd finish her off on the yacht. Yeah, that plan was good, Victoria agreed, but the old witch was tougher than she looked. At least the fall scrambled her brain. Old witch. That's how my son spoke about his mother. You know, Victoria continued, I almost admire her. She used to be a very smart woman. Used to be, Daniel agreed. but lately nothing but a burden. Always meddling, always asking questions. And now she'll finally get what she deserves, Carol finished. Enough. I couldn't listen to another word. Slowly, I opened my eyes and rose from the chair. You know what, darlings? I said in my clear, steady voice. I'll get exactly what I deserve. But you... They froze in shock. What? How? Victoria stammered. How am I alive? I smiled. Simple. I didn't drink your poison. I pulled my phone from my pocket, but I recorded every word. Your confession about Richard, your plan to kill me, your plot against Michael, all of it. Daniel leapt to his feet. That's impossible. You're senile. You have dementia. I have an excellent memory, son. I remember everything, including the way you betrayed your own mother. Victoria's face drained of color. You were pretending this whole time? From the moment I fell off that yacht, I said evenly, and thank you, by the way, for confirming attempted murder. Carol lunged for my phone, but I stepped back. Too late, darling. The recordings are already with David and the police. You're lying, Victoria screamed. Check for yourself. Right then, red and blue lights flared through the window. Looks like our guests have arrived, I said calmly. Victoria rushed at me with her fists, but the front door burst open and officers stormed in. Hands up! Nobody move! Daniel bolted for the back door, but they caught him before he made it outside. Mom, he cried, I didn't want this. They made me do it. It's too late for repentance, son, I said, my heart shattering inside me. Victoria, Carol, and Daniel were cuffed and led out. My younger son didn't even glance back at me. Then Michael rushed in, his face pale with panic. Mom, what's happening? David called. He said you were in danger. I wrapped my arms around him. It's over, son. We're safe now. But why? Victoria, Daniel. Sit down, Michael. There's something you need to hear, and I told him everything, that his wife had been a murderer, that his brother had betrayed us, that his father had been poisoned. Michael listened in stunned silence, unable to believe his ears. So Victoria never loved me? No, son. She used you, and Daniel, my own brother. I know how much it hurts. I feel it too. We sat together in the hollow quiet of the house, clinging to each other. The family was shattered, but we were alive, and that was what mattered. Justice had been served, but at a cost I would carry for the rest of my life.